Hi, I'm Dino Longera of Majestic Arms. Today we're going to put a speed strip kit into a Ruger 2245. The gun we're going to work on is their new 2245 RP Lite Mark III series. So let's get started. The very first thing we're going to do, we're going to check always to make sure that your gun is not loaded, visually inspect the chamber. We're going to close the bolt. We have to dry fire it once. Now we remove our magazine. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to open the mainspring housing assembly. And that's the little arrangement in the back of your frame. You've got a small latch here, sort of like opening a pocket knife. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to come into the corner with a little screwdriver. I'm going to pry open the latch. Now at this point the entire mainspring housing assembly will hinge away from the frame. Oftentimes you can grasp it and pull it straight down, but many times it's going to be very, very tight. I'm going to use a nylon punch and I'm going to tap the top of the pin. You can also use a wooden dowel, will work every bit as well. And I'm going to give it a couple of taps and get that pin to move down. Usually once it moves you can grasp and remove the entire mainspring housing assembly, which is this. Now we're going to lay that aside. At this point I'll remove the bolt from the receiver tube. Now what we want to do is we want to dismount the upper receiver and barrel assembly from the pistol grip frame. A lot of people will hold it this way and they'll strike the back with a mallet. And that's all well and fine, that works. Problem is if you miss you can break your sights, or if you hit it a little too hard the whole upper receiver tube goes skittling across the floor. So the way I prefer to do it is I'm going to hold it like this, grasping the receiver and the barrel. I'm going to hold the grip frame. And I'll come to the corner of my workbench where there's a leg. I'm going to use a soft pad and I'm going to give it a good thump. I'm going to hit here to dismount the upper receiver from the grip frame. One good little rap usually does it. Okay, there we go. We now have our upper receiver dismounted from the grip frame. We can lie that aside. Now we're going to take off the grips. I have a 332 Allen key and I'll undo the 2 screws on each side. I'll take off each grip panel and lie them aside for now. Now we're ready to change the hammer. Your kit came with a new hammer. If you have a Mark III, we offer you 2 distinct options. The big difference between the Mark III series of pistols and all of the earlier Mark IIs is that the Mark III series has a magazine disconnector, which means the gun will not fire or function without the magazine in place. We offer the Mark III owner 2 distinct options. We have a dedicated Mark III kit where you will maintain the mag disconnector. We also have what's our most popular seller, the 3.2 kit, where you will omit the magazine disconnector. The first thing we're going to do is right here where the pin that the hammer pivots upon comes into the frame, there's a retainer spring that keeps it in place. Never try to drive these pins out with force. It's the wrong way to do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a small punch in there and I'm going to flex the spring away from the pin and hold it away from the pin. Now I'm going to come in on this side and now the pin, smooth as silk, slides right out. All you have to do, these pins don't fit tight, is get the pin to come out of the frame, and at this point I can grasp the entire hammer assembly and just move the pin far enough to release it and it comes out. And here we have our entire hammer and magazine disconnect assembly. Now what most people do, they tend to have a mistake, they take the pin out all the way. What will happen is the safety is going to fall out. There's the pin that it pivots upon. The sear is going to now fall backward into the frame and be out of position, and it leads to a lot of confusion. The easy thing to do, I'm going to take the whole sear arrangement out and just show you how to put it back in. So right now we're just going to work on these 3 parts. This is the sear spring, that's the sear pin. Inside the frame there's a little pocket. The sear spring has a loop here. The loop drops into the pocket. The coils will be towards the center of the frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look inside. It's a little bit difficult to see, and I'm going to slide that sear spring in until I get it into the pocket. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the other side. You'll notice that pin has a groove. The groove is the last part to go into place. I'm going to take a small punch. I'm going to start the pin through the frame, and I'm just going to pick that spring up and get it over the pin. Just like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put the sear back into the frame. The sear has a crescent-shaped cutout, radius, that faces the back of the frame. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it with a pair of forceps. You can also use a pair of needle nose pliers. And I'm going to move that pin so that I'm holding the spring and giving me the clearance to get the sear in there. And I'm going to bring the sear in from the back towards the pin. When it lines up, I'll push it and the pin goes into place. The sear must sit in an upright position. The next thing is the hammer pin. It also has a groove. The groove is the last part to go in. This spring, if you can see it, must go on the back side of the hammer pin. So the way I'm going to do that is with my finger I'm going to flex that spring and I'm going to set it up on the back side of the hammer pin. The sear has to be picked up. When you're in the right position, the sear will have spring tension. At this point we can put the safety back into the frame. When we look at the safety, we must be mindful there's a very small spring and a plunger, which is what gives the safety its detent. Be sure that you don't lose that. Oftentimes the plunger will fall out. For some reason, most of the time the spring will stay in the hole. But as you can see, we've got those parts in place. With the sear in its proper upright position, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the safety from the front. I'm going to snake it through the frame. And once I'm in place, I'm just going to push it with a punch and I'm going to get it into place. Now what I'll do is I'll start the pin. That pin is holding the safety. The sear is in its upright position and that assembly is all correct. We also should be mindful in the center of your trigger you have a spring and a plunger that operates your disconnector bar. Let's be mindful not to lose that. The first thing we're going to do is we need to take the strut and the pin from the original hammer. So I'm going to use a scrap block of aluminum with holes in it, otherwise known as a bench block, and my 332 punch, and I'm going to tap that out. We can lay aside the original factory hammer. We're not going to reuse it. If you're working with the dedicated Mark III kit and you're going to maintain the magazine disconnector, our Mark III hammer has a cutout on the right side to incorporate those parts. So we'll restart the Ruger part pin into the new Mark III hammer. This is where a pair of forceps comes in handy. I'll hold it and get it started in the hole. A little bit tricky, and I'll tell you why in a moment. The easy way I find to do this is once I've got it started, to bring the strut into the hammer, look down on it, and when it all lines up, I'm actually going to tap the hammer and drive it down onto the pin. It's much easier to get the parts aligned this way. Now when you look at these pins, you'll always see a little dimpling that Ruger has done from the factory. So I'll take a punch that's been sharpened and I'll redimple it. They do that so that it stays snug and tight and in place. The other thing to mention is that there is a right and a wrong way to put in the strut. The strut has a radius cutout, and the other side is straight. The radius faces the rear. Now take these components, which are your mag disconnector. You've got a dogleg shaped piece of sheet metal, a spring, and a piece of tubing with a spring clip that comprises the components for the mag disconnector. Those go on the right side of the hammer, just like so. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold it like this, pivot up my disconnector bar, get this positioned in the disconnector bar, and you got to keep that spring in the position towards the back, just like so, and bring that all down into the frame. The easy way to do it is to look at this hole on the opposite side. When it all lines up, I'll push on that pin and I should be able to get it all back in there together, just like so. At this point we can check function. Put in a magazine. You should be able to cock your hammer. If you put pressure on the back of the hammer, the sear, which is mounted right in front of and below the hammer, will retain it in a rearward position. When you pull the trigger, the hammer will go forward. I'll do that function test again. This time I'll lock on my safety. There's no spring on the job, so you got to put your thumb back here and be spring for a moment. Doesn't go off, turn off my safety, and the hammer goes forward. But what we're going to do is we're going to put in a 3.2 kit. So we're going to remove this hammer and we're going to show you how to put in that one. Again, I'm flexing the spring away from the pin. I push on it and see if we can do it the easy way. Just get the pin out enough to release the assembly, pivot it up. Now I can take all of these components that comprise the mag disconnector and I'm going to omit them. I'm going to swap the strut and the pin into a 3.2 style hammer, and I'll show you the difference in a moment. The 3.2 kit is going to come to you with a hammer that has no relief cut for the magazine disconnector components. It's parallel on both sides. And just as we did earlier, we're going to replace the strut and the strut retainer pin into the new hammer. And we're going to look down on the top and we're going to tap it into place. We're going to take a punch with a sharpened point and we're going to give it a little bit of dimple stake to hold it in place. Now the bushing drops right into the right side of the hammer, just like that. Now at this point, I'm going to take this entire arrangement, like this. I'm going to put it into the frame. I'm looking through the hole, looking for my alignment. I see it. I put it into place. I remove my magazine. Now the hammer rocks back, putting pressure on the back. When I pull the trigger, it flies forward. When I lock the safety on, with pressure on the back, it won't. Turn the safety off. And that's all correctly installed. And we're pretty much done with the lower half. What we'll do right now is we'll remount the upper receiver and barrel to the grip frame. The front of your frame has a lug, which is essentially a hook arrangement. Your receiver has a corresponding cutout. You put the two together, just like so, and they should fit pretty snugly. Now again, many people will hold the gun and they'll hit the muzzle with a mallet to try and seat it onto the frame. It works, it's okay, but you can miss and you can break your front sight. And the way I prefer to do it is I'm going to put my thumb through the trigger guard, I'm grasping the barrel, I'm going to put this hand around the frame, and I'm going to come to the corner of my bench on a padded surface, and I'm going to give it one thump. This is imperative. The upper receiver should overhang the pistol grip frame just slightly, about 1/16 of an inch, maybe a little less. Before we go on, the next thing we're going to do is a simple modification to the recoil spring guide. Push on the front and remove it from the bolt. What we have is a rod of steel that's been split. They slip on the spring, they put in the horseshoe, and they crimp it shut. That crimp right there, I'm going to give it a little bit of a concave bevel, and I'm going to smoothen it up. I'm going to use a Dremel tool with a 1/4-inch stone. You can also use a round pillar file or even a stick with some 240 sandpaper or cloth wrapped around it. Okay, that's done. I've given it a little bit of a concave. I've given it a bevel on the top and the bottom, which helps for this pin to go past it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that back in the bolt. The key goes into the slot. And turn it around, slightly compress it, and make sure it sits flush to the bolt body. At this point, we're going to put this back into the receiver tube. Your hammer must be in a cocked position, laying flat, to allow the bolt back in. So we slide the bolt right back into the receiver tube. We can lay that aside. We've got one more part to install. We're going to take our mainspring housing assembly, and what we must do now is change out the original solid bolt stop pin for the two-piece part from Majestic arms. So I'm going to use my bench block again, and I'm going to come over here. Again, this pin has got a little stake on it, so it's going to be snug. And I'm going to drive that down. The easy way to do it is don't punch the pin out of the mainspring housing assembly all the way. Just tap it far enough to release the original part. You have to check it a couple of times, and that comes out, and I left the pin in the housing. It's a lot easier. If it pops out, you can put it back in, it's no big deal, but if you do it this way, life is a little bit simpler. I'm going to take the new bolt stop pin and I'm going to slide it in there. I'm going to look down from the top. When I see them aligned, I'm going to give it a tap, and I'm going to actually push the mainspring housing assembly down onto the pin. Once again, when you look at these, you're going to see little dimples that somebody in the factory did. So again, with a sharpened punch, a little dimple on each side will keep that pin nice and snug and functioning well. Now we're ready to reassemble the pistol and check its final function. Now we're going to do what's called the Ruger dance. Earlier, the hammer had to be cocked to allow the bolt back into the receiver tube. But now, just the opposite. The hammer must be uncocked. So look into the back of the frame, identify the hammer. When you pull the trigger, the hammer will go forward. But bear in mind, we have no spring on the job at this point. Gravity might do the job, but oftentimes you have to look in, pull the trigger, and push the hammer forward. At the same time, the little strut that dangles from the hammer should be laying down right about here, parallel to the grip frame. And what we'll do is we'll take the bolt stop pin and we'll begin to snake it up through the receiver. Oftentimes at this stage it'll be tight. If it is, with the mainspring housing assembly open and a plastic mallet, this is not the job of a hammer. Just tap it until you've completely seated it. The mainspring housing assembly should close. Now here's a common mistake people make. That mainspring housing closes effortlessly, the latch went, seems like the simplest thing in the world, but you can't work the gun, it will not cock. The reason is the little strut did not properly position itself in the mainspring housing assembly. So I'm going to open it again. I'm going to hinge it away from the frame. Now if you look here, there is a V-shaped cutout, and at the bottom of that cutout is the cup that's sitting on the mainspring housing assembly. That little strut must find itself into that notch. The way to do it, I do it this way. I hold the pistol upside down with the muzzle slightly elevated, and I make the strut lean directly on the mainspring housing assembly so that as I close it, I catch the strut, and you know you're on the right track. The last little bit should have some spring tension. There. Now we'll cock the gun, and we'll start a function check. I will dry fire it, and I'm going to maintain pressure on the trigger holding it. Pull the bolt back, and I'm going to check my disconnector. When I let go of the trigger, it should reset, it should refire. No problem there. I'll do that same check now, and I'll check my safety. When I turn off the safety, I should be able to dry fire it. Now for the speed stripping. Once you've done that, you remove your magazine, check to make sure your gun is not loaded. Take the Allen key that was supplied in your kit, it's a 532 size, and you put it directly into the new two-piece bolt stop pin. Now when the kit is new, that pin's going to be very snug to undo. Might even make a little crackling sound. It's been intentionally manufactured that way. And we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is a relief cut on the pin. If you make it face the back, the pin comes out easier. If you don't, it still comes out, but it's easier if you just do it that way. And now I can slip out my bolt for easy cleaning. I put my bolt back into the receiver tube, and right now it's engaging the hammer. And what has to happen is the bolt has to cam and step over the hammer. So you slide it in until you feel it make contact. In the same way you seat a magazine in a pistol, you just give the back of the bolt a slap and it'll go home. When you look in the hole, you'll see a little bit of the recoil spring guide interfering in the hole. It's perfectly normal. The easy way to do this is to put the pin on the short side of the Allen key. So now I have a handle, and I'm holding my gun secure. I'm going to put it in, push and twist, and it'll step past the end of that rod. And now just thread this back into place, 4 or 5 revolutions, hand tight, it's all that's necessary. Check your function, and you're good to go. We've just installed our 3.2 kit in a Ruger 2245 RP Lite. Thank you very much for watching the videos, and thank you very much for buying Majestic Arms products.